The following are learning objectives for this course. Upon completing this course, you will learn why traditional approaches to safety management activities are necessary but perhaps not sufficient at eliminating accidents and injuries in the workplace. You will understand why discipline-based safety management doesn't work to motivate safe behavior, and you will be able to use positive feedback to motivate safe performance. And finally, after completing this course, you will be able to apply the skills you've honed to build an enhanced climate for safety. You, as a supervisor, shape the culture in which you work by how you behave. That is, by what you do and say. You can even impact the culture by what you don't do. Remember the old adage that actions speak louder than words? Well, that's often true. Take, for example, a supervisor who walks by an employee who is not wearing the proper personal protective equipment. This supervisor may choose to either stop and address the situation or walk by and ignore it. Ignoring the infraction lets the employee know that it's okay with that supervisor if you don't follow safety rules. Regardless of the supervisor's reasons for walking by, for example, he or she may be in a hurry to make a meeting or might be preoccupied with something else, the message to the employees is, PPE doesn't matter. That's not to say you must be a safety watchdog ready to catch employees doing something wrong. Quite the contrary. We'll discuss later how important it is for a positive culture to provide feedback for doing things right. That is, catching employees doing it the right way. Oh, there will be times when you see employees performing at risk, and you'll have to correct this behavior. But in this course, you'll learn how to provide that feedback effectively and also how to use positive feedback to motivate safe performance. Let's first look at how safety has traditionally been addressed to get a more complete picture. Traditionally, when safety programs have been implemented, the first thing addressed is engineering and the environment. We try to design out or eliminate as many hazards as possible in the workplace and working environment. We ensure adequate ventilation for gases, re-engineer workstations so that they are ergonomically correct, and we design the physical structure to withstand the intended loads. Addressing the environmental exposures and with appropriate engineering controls in place, we should see a reduction in injuries and potential injuries. Once we address engineering and environmental concerns, we develop and implement policies, procedures, and management systems to ensure safe work practices, thereby preventing accidents and injuries. These policies and procedures might include such things as lockout-tagout procedures, respiratory protection, job safety analyses, employee hiring practices, accident investigation procedures, and progressive disciplinary action protocol. When the necessary policies and procedures are in place and employees have been trained on them and are using them effectively, we should see a further reduction in injuries and potential injuries. The engineering, environment, policies, and procedures approaches to safety are the necessary precursors to safe performance. But they are not necessarily sufficient to ensure safety. Most of you would agree that despite how well engineered your workplace is and how many policies and procedures you have in place to protect it, you still might encounter an accident or an injury. The missing link in the equation is a software issue. It's the people. People can simply not follow procedures, be preoccupied or rushed at work, take unnecessary risks, be impaired by drugs or alcohol, or communicate poorly. Such states lead to an increased risk of accidents and injuries. It's really the acts, actions, and attitudes of people operating within and around our work environment that determine safety performance. And who better to address all three aspects of safety, the engineering, environment, policies, procedures, and the people, than you, the supervisor? It's outside the scope of this training program to address engineering and safety policies and procedures. If you need additional training on these topics, please discuss this with your manager, human resource trainer, or with your traveler's risk control consultant. Remember, these are critical components to overall safety, and they are often the necessary but not sufficient precursors to safe performance. For our purposes in this training, we will focus on the human element in safety and performance and on helping you as the supervisor manage the human element. By By managing the human element in safety, we simply mean helping people perform their jobs more safely. And of course, safer performance is what we're after. Helping people to go home with all of the body parts they came to work with in the correct place. It's that basic. And what does this mean for your company? It means better performance, higher morale, and increased profitability for your company. Managers and supervisors are one of the best ways to impact a company's safety efforts. After all, it's you who interact directly with employees, setting the tone for what does or does not occur. As a part of the management team, employees will look to you and your efforts when they think about whether the company cares about their safety. Ensure that you are helping to provide visible management commitment to safety. Visible management commitment is the starting point for virtually any effective safety effort. Without it, strong safety performance is almost impossible. Management's approach to safety sets the tone for the entire facility. If management largely ignores safety, so will nearly everyone else. If management leads the safety effort, others will follow that lead. There is perhaps no more direct and effective way for a company to communicate that safety is important than by including safety among its accountabilities. Just as you are held accountable for production or performance, so too should you be held accountable for the safety and well-being of your employees. Having an accountability for safety sends a clear message from management that safety is important. You can't just say safety is important, not back that up with accountability, and expect people to behave as if safety is important. You wouldn't think of managing production or quality by simply saying they're important and not holding people accountable, so why wouldn't you treat safety in the same way? Traditionally, if there has been some kind of safety accountability system in place, supervisors have been held accountable for the number and costs of accidents and injuries in their work group. A more positive and proactive approach is to hold supervisors accountable for activities that promote safe working conditions and safe worker behavior. More proactive, positive safety activities which you can and should initiate include clearly define and consistently enforce safety rules and discipline. Make sure you understand the safety rules and discipline policies. Although you may not agree with them, it is your responsibility as a supervisor to uphold them. Take corrective action when you see a safety rules violation. Safety rules that are not consistently enforced do more harm than good. When employees see a supervisor or manager overlooking a safety rules violation, they justifiably figure that they can get away with it too. If some employees are disciplined for a rules violation and others are not, potentially dangerous issues of unequal employee treatment arise. Finally, lack of consistent safety rules enforcement makes employees cynical about the organization's commitment to safety. Identify and correct physical safety hazards. As a supervisor, it's paramount that you pay attention to physical safety hazards and do your part to get them promptly corrected. You must also attend to any operational hazards. For example, as a supervisor, you have to fix not only the broken guard, but the reason the guard was allowed to remain broken as well. Your internal safety manager or your traveler's risk control representative or a consultant can assist with work hazard analysis and safety inspections. Conduct accident and near-hit investigations to help identify the precursors to these incidents to prevent them from occurring in the future. Supply the necessary resources. Ensuring workplace safety requires a significant investment of resources, including the direct cost of equipment and maintenance and the indirect cost of personnel time devoted to safety. There is simply no way to achieve good safety performance without this investment. As a supervisor, it's your task to ensure your employees have the necessary resources to do their jobs safely. Here are more steps to take to improve safety. Set a good example for safety. Demonstrate your support by your actions. When you are on the job, make sure you set a good safety example by demonstrating that safety is an important part of your job. This means not only complying with all of the safety rules and procedures, but also in your support of safety. For example, when you start staff meetings, start with safety. When you get status reports, start with safety. When you talk with employees, start with safety. When money needs to be spent for good reason, you spend it. Things like that. How can you expect to hold your employees accountable for safety if you yourself aren't accountable to your employees? Give employees a part to play in safety. Make sure that you give employees an important role in maintaining and improving safety. Don't take sole responsibility for the safety of your unit. Engage your employees in safety efforts. Help them to participate in safety improvements. Make sure you allow them release time from work to volunteer on company-wide safety initiatives or safety committees. Ask for employee safety suggestions and follow up on their ideas. Communicate. Talk one-on-one with employees about safety and discuss safety in regular work group meetings. Do not focus solely on production or performance to the exclusion of safety. Remember, in order to meet those tightened deadlines or increased pressures, it's even more important to attend to safety. Safety shortcuts are not the way to meet these deadlines. Include a safety tip in every department meeting as a way to keep safety fresh on everyone's minds. Review safety and injury statistics with the group and encourage employees to take responsibility not only for their own behavior, but for others as well. Reinforce safe employee behavior. A particularly important kind of safety communication from management involves recognizing employees, supervisors, and managers who contribute in a noteworthy way to the safety effort. Such recognition works best when it consists primarily of verbal praise from management, perhaps accompanied by a small token award symbolizing the safety contribution. Big-ticket prizes awarded through drawings or bingo games are counterproductive in that they focus attention on the prize rather than on the safety contribution. Such gimmick approaches of traditional safety programs can send the message that management thinks employees must be bribed to work safely. In fact, feelings of accomplishment and of genuine appreciation from others are powerful motivators that will keep people working for safety without the need for gimmicks. And finally, correct at-risk employee behavior. When employees do something at risk, provide corrective feedback in a positive, helpful way. Focus on the at-risk behavior. Do not attack the individual's personality. Point out the problem and then offer guidance to correct it. If discipline is necessary, provide it. However, it's far more motivating to focus on positive approaches for encouraging safe behavior than on discouraging at-risk behaviors. Go out of your way to make sure every day you provide recognition to someone doing it the safe way. But wait, aren't these kinds of safety activities really the responsibility of the safety director? It's common for supervisors who aren't held accountable for safety to view these kinds of safety supporting activities as someone else's responsibility. In fact, if your organization is large enough to have a safety director, yes, it is the role of this person to support your performance of these activities by training you, monitoring your performance, and so on. But it's everyone's responsibility to help ensure safety at work. And as a supervisor, you have a tremendous amount of influence over your employees. Remember, you are the CEO to the employee you supervise. With that comes the responsibility to do all you can to ensure their safety and well-being. There are a number of steps a supervisor can take to address safety. Next to each item below, click your cursor on either the yes or no button to indicate whether or not this is something a supervisor can do to impact safety. That's right. Supervisors should set a good safety example. Yes, supervisors should praise safe behavior. That's right. It's the responsibility of supervisors to correct at-risk employee behavior. Right. Supervisors must enforce safety rules. Yes, supervisors must provide the necessary resources to ensure safety. As you can see, there are a number of steps a supervisor can and should take to ensure safety. Another question you may be asking is, with so much focus on safety activities, why aren't these traditional approaches to safety enough to eliminate on-the-job accidents and injuries? Unfortunately, even with engineering controls, safe working environments, and effective policies and procedures, we still encounter employee injury and even death. Let's talk about why employees work at risk or engage in unsafe behaviors. As a supervisor, why do you think employees act at risk? Using your mouse, click on any of the following reasons you think employees work at risk. That's correct. All of these items have been given at one time or another as reasons why employees work at risk. But the bottom line is, it's very few employees who are actually wanting to get injured so they can get out of work. The majority of employees are not lazy, stupid, or uncaring. They happen to work at risk for very legitimate reasons. These reasons usually fall into one of three kinds. First, workplace conditions often encourage at-risk behavior. Much of our work behavior is shaped and determined by the environment in which we work. We tend to follow how other people behave and think. For example, we don't usually come to work just whenever we want to. We come at the time we're expected to be there. We don't tend to dress however we feel. We tend to dress in something that will fit in with what others are wearing. At-risk behavior follows this same practice. We tend to behave as others do, and they behave in ways that are allowed by the organization, in essence, allowed by their supervisor. So when we talk about workplace conditions that encourage at-risk behavior, it often is within the reach of the supervisor to change the workplace condition to allow for safe performance. Take, for example, employees not using their PPE because it fits awkwardly or is ill-maintained. Chances are employees won't use this equipment for their safety. It's your job to help identify why the PPE is not being used and to work to remove these barriers. If the equipment doesn't fit right, work with purchasing to acquire better fitting equipment. Another way workplace conditions encourage at-risk behavior is through workload pressures. Sometimes these pressures are explicit, but they can also be implied. Regardless, the interpretation is that production is more important than anything else, including safety. As a manager, you may feel this pressure yourself. The problem is that if you ignore safety, chances are, over the long run, you or one of your people will get hurt. Then any hope for a productive and profitable year or season is gone, and you'll have to live with the fact that you could have helped prevent the injury. Don't take that chance. Encourage your people to perform safely with each and every act. Another reason employees work at risk is that they are unaware the behavior is at risk. They may never have been trained on the safe way, or they may have received training but not retained this knowledge. There may be no physical reminders to them on safe practices. You can be the source of these reminders. First, by your actions and coaching, and also by materials that you post or share. You can hold team or group meetings to discuss safe behavior. In these ways, you help to reinforce the safe way. The third reason supporting why employees work at risk is really due to human nature. Unfortunately, natural laws usually favor at-risk behavior. That is, naturally, rewards and punishments nearly always favor at-risk behavior. That's because doing something the risky way is almost always faster, more convenient, and more comfortable. Imagine you're on your way home and you're approaching a stoplight near your house. You know that this light takes a really long time to turn green. You're late and you'd really like to be home. In the distance, the light turns yellow. What do? Push the accelerator a little harder or put on your brakes. Most people do the at-risk behavior of zipping through the light. And almost always, nothing bad happens. Your immediate reward is beating the light and getting home quicker. Do you have difficulty getting your employees to wear their personal protective equipment as they should? Why do you think that is? The equipment tends to be uncomfortable and perhaps doesn't feel quite right. It takes time to remember to bring it to work, and it's sometimes inconvenient. Not right there when and where you need it, and it usually takes a minute or two to get it on. Then it can be difficult to keep clean or fog-free, etc. Isn't it faster to move that heavy load yourself without taking the time to get someone to help you? Isn't it more convenient to use the closest tool at hand, even if it isn't exactly the right tool for the job? Isn't it more comfortable working without those safety glasses or earplugs than with them? Of course it is. On the other hand, we have to admit that the chances of an injury resulting from any single at-risk behavior, moving something heavy without help just this one time, using the wrong tool just this one time, working without eye or hearing protection just this one time, is almost always very low. That's why people take these shortcuts. They think we can get away with it, and nearly all the time, they're right. In situations like this, when the rewards of at-risk behavior are certain to occur and the risk of punishment in the form of an injury is low, it's human nature to take the risk. In case you're having trouble accepting this, consider an at-risk behavior that's very common, speeding. Why is it that almost everyone drives faster than the speed limit at least sometimes? After all, everyone knows that speeding increases the risk of an accident, and there's the added risk of getting a ticket. Are there any benefits to speeding? Sure. It gets you where you're going faster, guaranteed. People speed because benefits like this are virtually certain to occur, while the increased risk of a ticket or an accident is low. It's the same with most at-risk behaviors at work. So how have organizations handled at-risk behaviors? The most common approach has been with a safety discipline system. But discipline-based safety management doesn't work at motivating safe behavior. Let's look at why. First, there's almost never employee input into the discipline system and therefore rarely buy-in. Safety rules are not usually consistently enforced by supervisors, especially when it's crunch time, when there are production or performance pressures. During those times, supervisors often look the other way or allow certain employees to get away with safety violations. Delivering discipline isn't fun. It rarely gets the supervisor praise from his or her boss, doesn't result in a pay increase or promotion, usually elicits an argument from the employee, and may leave the supervisor short-staffed if it results in suspension. And certainly the employee doesn't like to receive discipline. At best, a discipline system affects behavior when the boss is watching. At worst, not at all. It also makes safety a negative. Supervisors are looking for people breaking the safety rules, doing something wrong. It's much more effective to manage behavior using reward rather than discipline. Both do influence behavior, but reward gets you so much more. When you use the threat of discipline to manage behavior, people will only do the minimum amount needed to avoid the discipline. Why should they do more? An example is following safety rules only when the boss is watching. On the other hand, as long as more and more effort leads to more and more reward, you'll get extra effort. In terms of side effects, using discipline to manage behavior makes people feel bad about the place they work, whereas using reward makes them feel good about it. Most supervisors, of course, would prefer high morale in their group to low morale. That's not to say there isn't a place for discipline in safety. There are some diehards who won't respond to the carrot, only to the stick. With these folks, you'll have to follow your company's progressive discipline policy, and although it's hard, you'll have to enforce the discipline. But behavioral science tells us that we can manage safety behavior so much more effectively when we use discipline as our last resort rather than our first. The safety discipline system should be established to provide behavioral boundaries and to handle those individuals who continually exceed those rules. What consequences do you expect when you hear, "Your supervisor wants to see you"? You certainly don't walk in expecting a pay raise, do you? Rather, you know you're about to get it in the seat of the pants for something. That's because most interactions are corrective and negative rather than supportive and positive. We want to promote more effective interactions among you and your employees, not make it more difficult. You'll learn some techniques today that get away from Hector the Inspector image and help you become more of a safety coach. But how do we do this? Let's talk about using positive feedback to motivate safe behavior. Without effective feedback and worker involvement, behaviors are not apt to change, and that's really what we're after. Increasing the number of safe behaviors and eliminating at-risk ones. For most people, the idea of providing rewards for desired behaviors in the workplace usually means pay raises, bonuses, prizes, and other material rewards. Others feel that the only source of reward for work performance should be one's paycheck. After all, you're being paid to work. Why should we have to give you any more for doing what is expected? In fact, everyday praise for good work is often the best reward to use, and it definitely is with respect to safety. It's highly motivating. People like it a lot. Hardly anyone thinks they get enough of it, and people will work for it. Have you ever had the experience yourself of someone important praising your work and that praise making you want to work even harder? Praise is easy to administer, requiring just a few words and maybe a smile. It costs nothing. For these reasons, unlike material rewards, everyday praise can and should be used every day. Further, a summary of the results of nearly 100 separate research studies showed that people given verbal reward for a behavior develop a more favorable attitude toward the behavior and are more likely to engage in the behavior in the absence of reward. Material rewards, on the other hand, do not produce this favorable impact on attitudes toward the behavior or on one's willingness to engage in the behavior without the reward. Everyday praise really is a great way to manage employee safety behavior. How do you give supportive, positive feedback? There are a number of things you can do to provide positive, supportive feedback to motivate safe behavior. First, it's best to give praise directly to the employee as soon as possible after the desired behavior. It's also important to identify and praise specific safe behavior so the employee knows exactly what behavior to repeat in the future. Such specific feedback, such as, "Nice job bending at the knees when you lifted that," also comes across as more sincere than a general, "Keep up the good work." Praise also comes across as more sincere when it recognizes behaviors that require extra effort. One example of extra effort is when doing something the safe way is clearly more trouble than doing it the at-risk way, such as asking for help in moving a heavy load. It takes more time and effort to ask someone to help you lift a load than to simply do it yourself. However, we all know what can happen in a split second if you lift a load that's too heavy. You will be paying for it in agony the rest of your life. In addition to praising someone for behaviors that require extra effort, it's also good to recognize when someone's safety behavior is improving from before. However, we don't want to overlook those stellar employees who do their job in a consistently safe way. They should get praise for their efforts too. There are a number of ways to provide positive, supportive feedback for safe behavior. True or false? Positive feedback should be provided in a timely fashion as soon as possible after. That's right. While it's all right to provide positive feedback at any time, it's most beneficial to do so as soon as possible after observing the safe behavior. True or false? Positive feedback should be provided privately, one-on-one. Yes, that's right. Positive feedback should be provided one-on-one and privately. If, on the other hand, you know the employee likes public recognition, then it can also be very motivating to provide praise publicly as well. Praise delivered publicly helps to remind others how to perform safely and that safe performance is appreciated. Employees, however, don't always perform safely. Why is it important that even low-risk behaviors are performed safely? Even though the risk of an injury resulting from engaging in an at-risk work behavior on any single occasion is often low, that risk is not zero. When many workers regularly engage in at-risk behavior, it guarantees that injuries will occur. Let's look at an example. Let's say each worker in a group of 100 engages in 4 at-risk behaviors a day. Not very many, really, when you consider the hundreds of work behaviors most employees engage in every day. That multiplies out to roughly 100,000 at-risk behaviors per year in this group of 100 workers. Even if the odds of any single at-risk behavior resulting in an injury are very low, you can be sure that bad luck is going to combine with some of those 100,000 at-risk behaviors, and people are going to get hurt. It's inevitable, the law of averages, if you will. Further, since we can't know when bad luck is going to punish an at-risk behavior with an injury, the only way to prevent injuries is for everyone to work safely all the time. Of course, if you're doing a good job of observing your employees' performance, you're going to see some of these at-risk or unsafe behaviors. When that happens, correct the at-risk behavior, but do so in a positive, constructive way that leaves your employee feeling helped, not chewed out. This means correcting the behavior one-on-one rather than embarrassing the employee in front of coworkers. Also, focus on the specific at-risk behavior. It doesn't help much to say, "Ken, aren't you ever going to learn how to lift correctly?" It's much more helpful to have feedback such as, Ken, the next time you lift, I'd like to see you bending at the knees rather than putting your back into it. Also, don't focus on the employee's attitude or personality. Those discussions often result in a negative spiral. Instead, focus on the behavior that's leading you to label this person as a bad attitude or negative personality. It's much easier to get someone to change a specific behavior than to get them to change their attitude or personality. Rather than accusing or lecturing the employee, discuss the at-risk behavior in a questioning, non-judgmental way. There's a good chance the employee just needs a reminder, or perhaps he or she needs some on-the-spot instruction on how to do the safe behavior. A great way to turn corrective feedback into a positive feedback opportunity is to ask the employee to demonstrate the safe behavior, then give praise. Finally, it's helpful to ask the employee for a commitment to do it the safe way next time. People are apt to think twice the next time when they have made a verbal commitment to do so. In addition to correcting at-risk behavior, you also want to problem solve with the employee about ways to make it safe in the future. What might you expect when you ask an employee why he or she performed at risk? There are a number of reasons why employees perform at risk. Click all of the following items you think are actual reasons given to supervisors when asked why someone performed at risk. Then click the Submit button to see how you did. It's too much trouble to do it the safe way. My dog ate my safety glasses. I didn't know I was supposed to. No one was looking, so I did it just this one time. Gosh, I must have lost my earplugs. I hadn't noticed. You don't. Oh, it doesn't matter. Nothing will happen to me. I've always done it that way before. I didn't realize I... Yes, you're right. Every excuse listed has actually been used in real situations to explain why someone performed at risk. As we've just seen, there are a number of reasons employees will give for why they perform at risk. And although listening to excuses is never fun, your job is to decipher what is being said to identify what will overcome the reason and prevent the at-risk behavior from occurring in the future. These explanations usually fall into about 5 categories. In other words, when you ask why, the reasons are usually because employees are simply unaware that their behavior is at risk. Perhaps they've forgotten that the behavior has been identified as at risk, or maybe they're just not conscious of doing it at risk, for example, using poor posture or not lifting correctly. Another type of reason you might get for why someone performed at risk is that employees who have engaged in an at-risk behavior in the past without getting hurt may simply not believe the behavior is at risk, at least not for them personally. Ever heard the following? I've been doing this way for 20 years and I never... Other times, employees understand that a behavior is at risk, but they do it anyway because they believe the safe behavior requires too much time, trouble, etc. Finally, sometimes it's the case that workplace conditions may encourage at-risk behavior. Examples of this include equipment that's hard to use safely and pressures to overlook safety to get the job done faster. As a supervisor, you must do all you can to minimize the workplace barriers to safe performance. Make sure that work orders are processed in a timely fashion and are completed. If safety equipment doesn't work for your people, engage them in helping to find some that will. If deadline pressures are prompting safety shortcuts, it's your role to remind everyone that they'll really miss the deadline if someone gets hurt, and it's your task to help renegotiate the deadlines or distribute the work such that meeting the deadlines can be done safely. Most of the employee explanations for an at-risk behavior will fall into one of these 4 categories we've just discussed, although perhaps there might be some other reason workers give. The main question after the why did you perform at risk is how are you going to respond to the information? Here are some tips for how to address these reasons. When employees demonstrate a lack of awareness that their behavior was at risk, there are a number of problem-solving strategies you can try. The simplest thing is just to give a reminder. Say something like, "Next time, try to remember to use the handrail. I don't want you to get hurt, okay?" It might be appropriate to give the employee some on-the-spot instruction, for example, reviewing proper lifting or tool use. When many in a group are using an at-risk behavior due to lack of knowledge or awareness, that suggests addressing the behavior through formal training or as a safety meeting topic or toolbox talk. It may be helpful to post signs in the work area to provide a reminder about the safe behavior. Sometimes it may even be appropriate to enlist the help of coworkers. For example, how about if we ask the others to keep an eye on whether you're using the designated walkways and remind you if you're not? Another problem-solving approach addresses reasons that involve employees who don't believe their behavior is at risk. Employees who have a history of engaging in an at-risk behavior without getting hurt may come to believe that the behavior is not at risk, at least not for them personally. Encouraging safe behavior in the future requires altering this belief. One way to approach this is to show your safety expertise by using statements such as, "If you've always done it that way and never gotten hurt, that just means you've been lucky. Many people get hurt doing it that way." Another example is, "You're young now and maybe you can get away with lifting like that for a while, but lots of people start having back problems by the time they're 25. According to the safety experts, if you keep lifting like that, you might be one of them." Another approach is to invoke consensus about the safe behavior. We're observing this behavior because a lot of people around here have agreed it's less safe to do it that way. Or, everyone else in the department is going along with doing it this way. If they waver, try to get them to agree. It sounds as if you're starting to feel that it would be safer to do it this way after all. I'll be the first to admit that changing someone's attitude about what's safe and at risk is not easy and doesn't happen overnight. But if you stick with it, you can get results. If all of this isn't working, another strategy is to try to get your safety genius to agree to perform safely because others are watching the way he or she is doing their job. You might say something like, "I know you've always done it this way, but we've got some new people around here who are watching how you do the job. Without your experience, they're likely to get hurt doing it that way. Think about how bad you'd feel if they got hurt doing it your way." Another reason for performing at risk is that the safe behavior is too difficult. Employees may understand that a particular behavior is at risk, but they do it anyway because they believe the safe behavior requires too much time or trouble. In other words, it's too difficult. The most common way employees express this is by saying simply, "I was in a hurry," which implies that they believe they don't have time to do the behavior the safe way. Here again, you need to use your powers of persuasion to encourage the safe behavior in the future. One way to do this is to champion safe behavior, to let the employee know that working safely is worth the extra effort. Here are some examples. "I know it takes longer to do it that way, but isn't it worth it to keep from hurting yourself?" Lots of times when people get hurt, it's because they're hurrying. It only takes a few extra seconds to do it the safe way. "I know the chances of getting hurt from doing that are small, but there's still a chance. Everyone has to do it the safe way every time if we're going to prevent injuries here. Sometimes we have to give a little extra effort to do the job the right way, the safe way. If we're going to be really good at our job, that's what it takes." You can also show concern for the employee, but remember to be genuine. Don't try to fake it. You might say something like, "Look, I don't want you getting hurt. I know you could keep on doing it that way and maybe not get hurt, but why take the chance? I'd feel bad if you got hurt. The rest of our group would too, and imagine how you'd feel. If you don't slow your forklift down when you go through that crossing, you might hit somebody. Think about how bad you'd feel if you really hurt somebody, put them in the hospital or something." Finally, if deadlines are the reason for the rushing and hurrying, as a manager, it's your job to renegotiate the deadlines or acquire the necessary resources to be able to meet them safely. Remember, if your people are performing at risk, it's just a matter of time before one or more of them will get hurt. Even when it's given constructively and intended to be helpful, people often have a hard time receiving corrective feedback. Sometimes they get defensive. A defensive response diverts attention away from the at-risk behavior and often results in an argument. Here are some examples of defensive responses and how to best counter them. In response to your corrective feedback, an employee may claim, "I didn't do it." If that happens, simply repeat what you saw or what you thought you saw. Behavior can happen fast, and it's okay to admit if you're not sure you saw something. Sometimes a veteran employee may give a defensive response to the effect that, "I know more than you." We can easily turn this to our advantage by asking the genius to be a safety role model. "I know the others around here look up to you because of your experience. Maybe you won't get hurt by doing it this way, but a new person probably would. Since they're watching you and learning, how about doing it the safest way so they don't get hurt?" You may occasionally encounter an employee who continues being defensive despite your best efforts. Maybe the person is simply having a bad day. If this happens, don't give in or apologize. Remember, by pointing out at-risk behavior, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to as a supervisor. But don't argue with the person either, because that doesn't accomplish anything. Simply try again another time. Perhaps an employee hits you with something for which you're totally unprepared. If you can't think of a good response, walk away and plan how to handle it next time. You might talk it over with your peers to get their ideas on how to handle it. By all means, keep your own emotions under control. If you feel yourself losing control, get out of the situation right away. In order to be successful as a supervisor and have the earned respect to lead, you must remain positive and in control of your temper. Let's review some problem-solving strategies with this brain teaser. Match the problem on the left with the problem-solving strategy listed on the right. That's correct. To address lack of awareness, use formal training and simple reminders. That's correct. To handle defensiveness, such as, "I didn't do it," repeat what you saw. That's correct. To address the problem that an employee doesn't believe their behavior is at risk, reiterate the facts and have them act as a model for safe behaviors. That's correct. To address the problem that performing the behavior safely is too difficult, champion safe behavior and show concern for their safety. You, as a supervisor, have the ability to promote a culture for safety. You can develop a high level of trust and communication between and among your employees and management. By your actions and activities, you will help ensure that safety is embedded within all business activities, that it is not just an afterthought. Ensuring that you are consistent in your enforcement of safety rules violations and performance feedback, you can help all employees comply with safety rules and procedures. When employees feel part of the process, they will be more willing to actively participate. When they engage and help to identify and correct safety hazards, you are setting the stage for safety success. You also help to promote a culture for safety when you address safety concerns in a way that's timely, accurately, etc. Often the system gets bogged down between the safety improvement suggestion and implementation. As a supervisor, you can assist in this process. Be an advocate for your people. Help them get the solutions they need. As you build a strong safety culture, you'll begin to see peer pressure for safety and not against it. You'll hear things like, "Well, that's just the way it is around here. We always wear our PPE." And as the culture matures, learning will come from incidents when they are viewed as an opportunity to make improvements to the system instead of opportunities to wear someone out. Remember, injuries and accidents don't happen in isolation. There is a whole system at work supporting them. When you see safety in this light and when you integrate safety into practice, you are helping to ensure everyone goes home safe. And that's what safety is really all about, caring about people. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.